Welcome, the most captivating science fiction stories where mystery, action, and love intertwine are here. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Marcus Sullivan wiped down the brass fittings of his cantina's bar for the third time that evening, watching the ice crystals form on the viewport as Kepler Station 7 drifted through the shadow of a dying star. Business had been slow since the mining consortium pulled out of the sector, leaving him with a surplus of premium Earth whiskey and a dwindling customer base of freight haulers and maintenance crews. The atmospheric recycler hummed its familiar tune, occasionally punctuated by the distant clang of docking clamps as another transport arrived at the station. Marcus had grown accustomed to the rhythm of frontier life, where excitement usually meant someone's life support system was malfunctioning. The cantina's entrance chimed with the arrival of a customer, and Marcus looked up to see a figure that immediately commanded attention. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with silver-streaked hair braided in complex patterns and ears that swept back in elegant curves. Her clothing suggested both wealth and practicality, expensive fabrics cut in styles that accommodated what appeared to be additional limbs folded against her back. "Welcome to Sullivan's," Marcus said, switching on the universal translator mounted behind the bar. "What can I get you?" The woman approached with measured steps, her violet eyes scanning the bottles displayed along the wall with obvious interest. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made Marcus straighten unconsciously. "I require Earth whiskey," she said, her accent carrying musical undertones that the translator couldn't quite capture. "The finest you possess. It is for a sacred ceremony." Marcus reached for his premium bottle, a 25-year-old single malt that had cost him 3 months' profits to acquire. "This is probably what you're looking for. It's from Scotland, aged in." "Perfect," the woman interrupted, though she seemed pleased rather than dismissive. "I am Lyrillith of House V. Thrani. The whiskey is needed for my stepdaughter's ascension ritual on Velthara." The automated bartender, a quirky unit Marcus had inherited with the cantina, suddenly activated and began dispensing what appeared to be motor oil into a cocktail glass. Its vocal processors crackled to life, detecting non-standard biochemistry, recommending petroleum-based refreshment for optimal customer satisfaction. Marcus quickly shut down the malfunctioning unit, while Lyrillith stared at the glass of motor oil with what might have been amusement. "I apologize for the machine," Marcus said, embarrassed. "It's never quite worked properly with non-human customers. Your mechanical servant believes I consume industrial lubricants. Apparently, last week it tried to serve a Centaurian trader battery acid." Marcus wrapped the whiskey bottle carefully. "So, this ritual, is it some kind of celebration?" Lyrillith's expression grew complex, mixing pride with what looked suspiciously like mischief. "My 4 stepdaughters are reaching maturity according to our customs. The whiskey serves as, how do you say, a catalyst for their bonding ceremony." The universal translator chose that moment to emit a series of electronic squeaks before announcing, "Translation matrix error. Attempting linguistic recalibration. Please stand by for improved accuracy." "Bonding ceremony," Marcus repeated, noting the way Lyrillith seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "That sounds important." "Indeed, without proper ceremony they cannot fully integrate with our world's ecosystem. They would remain incomplete." She reached for her payment chip, but the device sparked when she touched it. "Curious. Your station's electromagnetic field appears to be interfering with my currency systems." Marcus watched as she tried the payment chip several more times, each attempt resulting in the same electrical failure. As a frontier trader, he'd learned to read people quickly, and Lyrillith's growing distress seemed genuine. "How much whiskey do you need?" he asked. "4 bottles, 1 for each daughter." She examined her malfunctioning chip with obvious frustration. "This is most unfortunate. Without the whiskey, the ceremony cannot proceed and my stepdaughters will remain unbound." The translator crackled back to life. "Recalibration complete. Previous translation accuracy estimated at 12%. Would you like me to repeat recent conversation with improved linguistic processing? No, thank you, Marcus said quickly, then turned back to Lyrillith. Look, I understand being stuck without payment options. What if we worked out some kind of trade agreement? Lyrillith's violet eyes sharpened with interest. What manner of trade? I don't know yet. What can you offer besides credits? She was quiet for a long moment, studying him with an intensity that made Marcus wonder if he'd somehow offended her. Finally, she reached into her traveling pack and withdrew what appeared to be an ornate scroll case. There is one possibility, but I must warn you, human Marcus Sullivan, that accepting would bind our families in ways you cannot fully comprehend. Families? Marcus felt a flicker of concern. I don't have a family, it's just me. Not yet, Lyrillith said cryptically, opening the scroll case to reveal a document covered in flowing script that seemed to shift colors as he watched. This is a traditional Velthari contract of mutual obligation. If you agree to provide what my family requires, you become invested in our success. The automated bartender suddenly reactivated. Warning. Customer appears to be presenting legal documentation of unknown origin. Recommend consulting qualified attorney before signing any. Marcus shut it down again. What exactly would this contract involve? You provide the whiskey for my stepdaughter's ceremony. In return, you become bound to our house with all the rights and responsibilities such connection entails. Lyrillith's expression was serious, but there was something almost hopeful in her eyes. It is not a decision to make lightly. Rights and responsibilities, Marcus repeated, such as. That would depend entirely on how the ceremony proceeds, she said, which wasn't exactly an answer. I can only say that Velthari contracts are comprehensive in their scope. Marcus looked at the woman before him, then at the whiskey she needed, then at the contract that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. His rational mind was screaming warnings, but something about Lyrillith's desperate dignity reminded him of his own early days on the frontier, when a single act of kindness from a stranger had saved his business. If I sign this, your stepdaughters get their ceremony. They do. And I get, what, besides the satisfaction of helping someone in need? Lyrillith smiled for the first time since entering his cantina, and the expression transformed her entire face. That Marcus Sullivan would be telling, do you accept? Marcus reached for his stylus, ignoring the voice in his head that sounded suspiciously like his mother warning him about deals that seemed too good to be true. But looking at Lyrillith, he found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, some risks were worth taking. I accept, he said, signing his name to the alien contract with a flourish. The document immediately burst into brilliant light, then dissolved into particles that seemed to sink into both their skins. Lyrillith nodded with what looked like profound satisfaction. Excellent. The whiskey must be delivered to Velthara within 7 standard days for the ceremony to proceed properly. I trust this will not be inconvenient. Marcus stared at the place where the contract had vanished, already wondering what he'd gotten himself into. Velthara, right. I don't suppose you'd care to mention how far that is from here. Only 3 hyperspace jumps, Lyrillith said cheerfully. I shall provide coordinates. Oh, and Marcus, you might want to bring formal attire. Velthari ceremonies can be elaborate. As she departed with her whiskey and a promise to send navigation data, Marcus found himself alone with the distinct feeling that his quiet life on Kepler Station 7 was about to become significantly more complicated. The automated bartender chose that moment to reboot itself. Welcome to Sullivan's Cantina. Would you care to try our house special? I'm told it pairs excellently with life-changing decisions of questionable wisdom. Marcus looked at the malfunctioning machine, then at the space where Lyrillith had stood and began to laugh despite himself. Why not? He said. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Velthara appeared in Marcus's viewport like a jewel suspended in space. its surface covered in what looked like crystalline forests that caught and refracted the light of its binary suns. The planet's cities floated in the upper atmosphere, connected by delicate bridges that sparkled like spun glass. Marcus had seen many worlds during his years as a trader, but nothing quite like this. "Incoming vessel, please state your business with House Vithrani," came the voice of traffic control, filtered through his ship's communication system. "Marcus Sullivan, delivering goods for Lyrillith of House Vithrani. She's expecting me." "Ah, the whiskey bearer," the controller said, and Marcus could swear he heard amusement in the translator's rendering. "You're cleared for docking at Platform 7. Welcome to Velthara, Marcus Sullivan. May your visit be enlightening." The docking platform extended from one of the floating cities, and Marcus guided his small transport through the approach sequence with growing amazement. The city itself seemed to be grown rather than built, its structures formed from the same crystalline material as the forests below. Gardens flourished in impossible places, and he could see beings moving through the air with what appeared to be personal flight systems. Lyrillith waited for him at the docking port, accompanied by 4 younger women who shared her general features, but each possessed distinctly different characteristics. The first had hair that moved like it was underwater, despite the lack of any breeze. The second seemed to be surrounded by tiny points of light that sparkled as she moved. The third had what appeared to be luminescent patterns running along her arms, and the fourth flickered slightly, as if she wasn't entirely solid. "Marcus Sullivan," Lyrillith announced formally, "may I present my stepdaughters? Zephyra, who commands the winds." The first woman stepped forward and inclined her head, her hair swirling in complex patterns. "Astrid, who shapes the crystal foundations of our world." The second woman's surrounding lights pulsed in what seemed like a greeting. "Nea, who communes with the living networks below." The third woman's arm patterns glowed brighter. "And Kira, who walks between dimensions." The fourth woman solidified just enough to offer a smile that was definitely flirtatious. Marcus pulled out the guidebook he'd hastily purchased during his journey, trying to find the appropriate greeting protocol. According to the text, he should express pleasure at the meeting while acknowledging their individual achievements. "I am honored to make your acquaintance," he said carefully, consulting his guidebook. "Your beauty brings joy to my household." He paused, checking the translation again. "No, wait, your household brings beauty to my joy." All 4 sisters exchanged glances, and Kira flickered with what might have been suppressed laughter. "Actually," Marcus tried again, "I think what I meant to say was," he flipped frantically through the guidebook. "Your presence makes my heart sing with the desire for eternal companionship." This time all 4 sisters looked at Lyrillith, who was trying very hard to maintain a dignified expression. "Perhaps," Lyrillith suggested gently, "we should proceed with the ceremony before my daughters expire from suppressed mirth." "Did I say something wrong?" Marcus asked, still clutching his guidebook. "Not wrong exactly," Zephyra said, her voice carrying the sound of wind through crystal formations. "But you may have inadvertently proposed marriage several times." "To all of us," Astrid added, her surrounding lights pulsing with obvious amusement. Simultaneously, Marcus felt his face burning. The guidebook said those were standard polite greetings. "They are," Nea said, her luminescent patterns shifting to what looked like sympathy. "If you're a Velthari male seeking to court multiple sisters from the same house." "Which technically you now are," Kira added, flickering back into partial translucency. "Thanks to the contract you signed with our stepmother." Marcus looked at his guidebook, then at the 5 women watching him with expressions ranging from amusement to curiosity. "I think I need a better translation program." The ceremony took place in a crystal amphitheater that had been grown from the living rock of the floating city. Marcus found himself seated in what Lyrillith explained was the position of honor, which seemed to involve being at the center of a complex geometric pattern. The integration period, as Lyrillith diplomatically termed it, proved to be more challenging than Marcus had anticipated. Living with 4 wives who possessed supernatural abilities required adjustments that no amount of guidebook study could have prepared him for. "Marcus," Zephyra called from the kitchen, her voice carrying a note of carefully controlled frustration. "Did you remember to anchor the breakfast dishes before I started the morning air circulation?" Marcus looked up from his attempt to understand Velthari tax codes to see every piece of dinnerware in their shared living space orbiting the ceiling in lazy circles. "I thought you had that under control." "I can control atmospheric pressure and wind patterns across a planetary scale," Zephyra replied with exaggerated patience. "But I still need someone to make sure the furniture is secured before I adjust the local air currents." This was the kind of domestic detail that their mystical bonding ceremony had failed to address. Marcus was learning that being a harmony anchor involved a lot more mundane coordination than the ancient prophecies had apparently bothered to mention. "Allow me," Astrid said, stepping into the room. The crystal formations in the walls began to resonate, creating a harmonic field that gently lowered the floating dinnerware back to the table. Though Marcus does need to remember that our abilities require environmental stability to function properly. "I'm still learning the rules," Marcus protested. "Yesterday, I thought I was being helpful by rearranging the furniture, and I accidentally disrupted Nea's connection to the planetary network." "You moved my meditation crystals," Nea pointed out, her arm patterns pulsing with gentle reproof. "They were positioned to align with the major network nodes. When you rearranged them into what you called a more aesthetically pleasing configuration, you basically disconnected me from half the planet." "The configuration was more aesthetically pleasing," Marcus argued. "It followed principles of interior design." "Human interior design," Kira added, flickering into visibility beside him. "Which doesn't account for interdimensional feng shui." Marcus was beginning to understand why Velthari males traditionally underwent years of training before participating in bonding ceremonies. The learning curve for someone who'd never had to consider the metaphysical implications of furniture placement was proving steep. The situation became more complex when representatives from the human colonial authority arrived to investigate reports of an irregular marriage contract involving a human citizen. "Mr. Sullivan," said Administrator Chen, a severe-looking woman who clearly disapproved of everything she'd seen since arriving on Velthara, "you understand that human marriage law doesn't recognize polygamous unions, regardless of the circumstances under which they were formed." They were meeting in the formal reception area of the house that Marcus now shared with his 4 wives, a space that Astrid had grown from living crystal specifically for diplomatic purposes. The walls pulsed gently with harmonic frequencies designed to promote calm discussion, though Administrator Chen seemed immune to their effects. "With respect," Marcus replied, "I'm not subject to human marriage law while residing on Velthara as part of a recognized family unit under local customs. The colonial authority maintains jurisdiction over human citizens regardless of their location," Chen stated firmly. "This arrangement violates multiple statutes regarding interspecies relationships and cultural integration." Zephyra, who had been listening to the discussion while maintaining careful control over the room's air circulation, finally spoke up. "Administrator Chen, are you suggesting that human law supersedes the sovereign authority of Velthara in matters of local custom?" "I'm suggesting that Mr. Sullivan may not have fully understood the implications of his actions when he entered into this arrangement. Did you fully understand the implications when you accepted your position with the colonial authority?" Kira asked, flickering into partial visibility near Chen's chair. "Or did you simply trust that you would learn as you went along?" Administrator Chen startled slightly at Kira's sudden appearance, then forced herself to maintain composure. "That's hardly the same thing, isn't it?" Astrid inquired, the crystal formations around the room beginning to resonate in patterns that made Chen's words sound slightly hollow. Both involve accepting responsibilities without complete knowledge of their ramifications, based on trust that the decision will prove beneficial. Marcus watched his wives work together to address the administrator's concerns, noting how their individual approaches complemented each other. Zephyra provided direct logical arguments. Astrid created environmental pressure through harmonic manipulation. Nea offered intuitive insights that seemed to come from nowhere. And Kira used her dimensional abilities to create psychological uncertainty. The point is, Nea added, her luminescent patterns shifting to configurations that somehow made her words more compelling. Marcus made his choice freely, with full knowledge that he was entering unknown territory. The fact that the results exceeded his expectations doesn't invalidate the decision. Besides, Marcus said, finding his own voice in the discussion, I'd like to point out that this arrangement has been beneficial for everyone involved. I'm happier than I've ever been. My wives have achieved integration with their planet's ecosystem that wasn't possible before, and we're contributing to interspecies understanding in ways that benefit both human and Velthari communities. Administrator Chen looked around the room at the 4 alien women and 1 human man who were clearly united in their opposition to her authority. The crystal walls continued their gentle harmonics, the air moved in patterns that promoted relaxation, and the overall atmosphere suggested that she was fighting a losing battle against forces she didn't fully understand. I'll need to file a full report, she said finally, which everyone present understood as bureaucratic surrender. Of course, Lyrillith said, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Please ensure it's comprehensive. The Cultural Exchange Board will be very interested in your observations about successful interspecies integration. After Administrator Chen departed, looking confused and slightly defeated, Marcus found himself alone with his wives for the first time in days. So, he said, settling into the chair that Astrid had grown specifically to accommodate his human physiology, how do you think that went? Better than expected, Zephyra replied, allowing the air currents in the room to return to their normal patterns. Though I suspect we haven't heard the last of this. The colonial authority doesn't like to admit that their policies might be incomplete, Nea observed. Her patterns shifting to what Marcus had learned indicated mild concern. But they also don't like diplomatic incidents with allied worlds. Which gives us leverage, Kira added, solidifying fully as she settled beside Marcus, assuming we want to use it. Marcus looked around at the 4 extraordinary women who had somehow become the center of his existence, then at the crystal city visible through their windows, and the vast network of possibilities that their shared bond had opened up. You know what, he said, I think we're going to be just fine. The planetary emergency began with a subtle tremor that ran through the crystal foundations of Velthara's floating cities, so faint that most residents dismissed it as normal geological activity. Marcus felt it through his connection to Astrid, a discordant note in the harmonic frequencies she used to monitor the world's structural integrity. Something's wrong, Astrid said, her surrounding lights shifting to patterns Marcus had learned to associate with deep concern. The resonance frequencies are becoming unstable. It's like the planet's core is singing off-key. Within hours, the problem escalated beyond subtle harmonic disruptions. The crystalline forests that formed the backbone of Velthara's ecosystem began showing signs of stress, their normally bright formations growing dim and brittle. The atmospheric processors that maintained the floating cities started producing irregular results, and the planetary network that Nea communed with began transmitting distress signals. This isn't a normal geological event, Zephyra reported from her position at the atmospheric monitoring station in their home. The pressure differentials are all wrong, and the wind patterns are becoming chaotic. It's like the planet's weather systems are trying to compensate for something massive and failing. Marcus stood in the center of their shared living space, feeling the distress of all four wives through their bond connection. Each was experiencing the planetary crisis through her specific abilities, creating a symphony of alarm that threatened to overwhelm his role as harmony anchor. "Kira," he said, focusing on the wife whose dimensional abilities might provide the clearest picture of what was happening. "Can you phase into the planet's core and see what's causing this?" Kira flickered through several levels of translucency before solidifying with a grim expression. "It's worse than we thought. The core isn't just destabilizing, it's fragmenting across multiple dimensional layers. Whatever's causing this exists in several realities simultaneously." Lyrillith arrived with a contingent of Velthari scientists and government officials, her usual composed demeanor cracked by obvious worry. "The Council of Houses has declared a planetary emergency," she announced. "Our attempts to address the core instability through conventional means have failed. We need alternative approaches." Alternative approaches meaning us, Marcus realized. The four sisters working together have never been attempted on this scale, one of the scientists explained. Individual abilities can influence specific aspects of the planetary systems, but a coordinated effort might be able to address multiple failure points simultaneously. "That might being the operative word," Astrid noted, her lights pulsing with calculation patterns. "The harmonic stresses alone could be devastating if we miscalculate." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling around him like a physical presence. Through their bond, he could sense each wife's capabilities and limitations, but also how their individual efforts could be amplified by working in perfect coordination. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Everything," Zephyra replied simply. "We can each affect our individual specialties, but stabilizing an entire planet requires integration across all systems simultaneously. You're our focal point. Without your anchoring influence, we'll just be four people working separately instead of one coordinated effort." The attempt took place in the primary crystal chamber beneath Velthara's capital city, a vast natural cathedral where the planet's harmonic frequencies were strongest. Marcus positioned himself at the chamber's geometric center, while his four wives took stations corresponding to their abilities. Zephyra at the atmospheric interface, Astrid among the core resonance crystals, Nea at the network connection points, and Kira at the dimensional access nodes. "Remember," Lyrillith called from the observation platform, "you're not just trying to fix individual problems. You're attempting to restore balance to an entire world's consciousness." Marcus closed his eyes and reached out through the bond connections, feeling each wife's unique perspective on the planetary crisis. Through Zephyra, he experienced the chaotic atmospheric pressures threatening to tear the floating cities apart. Through Astrid, he felt the harmonic dissonances rippling through the crystal foundations. Through Nea, he sensed the planetary network's desperate attempts to maintain communication across failing connections. Through Kira, he glimpsed the dimensional fractures that were causing reality itself to become unstable. But more importantly, he could feel how their individual abilities could work together. Zephyra's atmospheric control could provide the pressure stabilization that Astrid needed to repair the harmonic foundations. Astrid's structural work could create the stable platforms that Nea required to re-establish network connections. Nea's network repairs could provide the dimensional anchoring that Kira needed to heal the reality fractures. "I can see it," he said aloud, his voice carrying through the crystal chamber's acoustics. "I can see how everything fits together." The coordination required absolute trust and perfect communication. Marcus found himself serving not just as an anchor point, but as a conductor, helping each wife understand exactly when and how to apply her abilities for maximum effect. When Zephyra needed to adjust atmospheric pressure without interfering with Astrid's harmonic repairs, Marcus provided the timing coordination. When Nea's network connections required dimensional stability from Kira without disrupting Zephyra's weather management,